Okay, so I'm going to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer here, okay? The majority of my experience speaking in front of an audience has come through my career in public education. So I've got a table over there that will help me out with that. They know what that's like. While I thoroughly enjoyed presenting 40-minute lectures and 7-minute halftime speeches, I can tell you that I don't have the same amount of confidence as I stand before you this morning. Trust me when I say that I'm wondering the same exact things you are right now. Why is he up there? And then probably a follow-up question, how's this gonna go? Yeah. I would also like to warn you that if I throw a dry erase marker or tip over a Gatorade cooler, it is simply a flashback, and I sincerely mean no harm. And I wish I was joking, right, Coach Ripley? Just making sure Brendan Chambers isn't in here. So, okay. Several months ago, I was asked to speak at the baccalaureate service for the 2017 graduates of Litchfield High School. The content of that message was designed to meet a simple objective: make a positive impact on a specific group of young adults by sharing my own personal journey of faith and discovery. I was not trying to preach something that had never been said or heard of before. This was not a social science lecture designed to educate and enlighten tomorrow's leaders. It was not a halftime speech meant to inspire and motivate before releasing the warriors back into battle. Rather, I wanted to spend time re-examining who we are in Christ and the potential pitfalls of diminishing that belief. Today, I'm going to share a modified version of that same message. And my sermon, during my sermon preparation, my repeated prayer was to find accurate words to describe His love for us and to find accurate examples of how we can better respond to that love. So with that, you can kind of see the first slide that we have up here kind of ties in what I view as the topic of this sermon, which would be what great love. And so to start out, I'm going to read from 1 John chapter 3, verse 1. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. This idea of family has really kind of been the foundation for my own journey or my own, at times, struggles, and then at other times kind of those aha moments or epiphanies. And so really I wanted to kind of set the tone here today, this morning, with this topic of family, okay? So over the last several years, I've become obsessed with this relationship story. The gospel does not repeatedly use other relationship-based examples. We are not called to be teammates of God. We're not called to be BFFs with God. Nor are we called to be neighbors of God. We shall be called children of God. Truly seeing myself as a son of God has changed my life in ways I cannot perfectly describe. When I think about this phrase, children of God, I no longer view this description of family as being the best available analogy for outlining our relationship with God. So for instance, I've heard this verse before. I've heard the gospel before. Thought you were going to come laser point me or something. So this isn't a new description for me. I've heard this before. I heard it growing up. I could have told you about it when I was young. But I think the big difference is that I used to think this analogy of family was just the best way to describe our relationship with God, if that makes any sense. So the big difference is this. It isn't an example of our relationship with God. It is the relationship we now have with God. And to me, that has changed everything. Rather than just thinking this is the best way we can describe it, is that it's kind of like you're a son or daughter of God. And for me, that is a thing of the past, and I have now come to realize it's not just an example, it's the truth. Perhaps it is my own personal journey into fatherhood that has helped me to see this with more clarity over the past few years. At home, Angie and I have tried to develop specific character traits in our young boys. By any means, we are not perfect parents, but we are trying to be intentional. For example, we have a series of statements we frequently use with our boys. And some of you Facebook followers may have seen this posted on Facebook a while back. But it's kind of fun because now it's to the point where our boys can recite these sayings. And when I woke up this morning, I had a conversation with our youngest son, Leonidas. And I told Leo, come on up here, he's all ready. I asked Leo, I said, Leo, Daddy's got to preach at church today. And he says, what's preaching? I said, well, Daddy's got to stand up in front of all these people and talk. We're going to come down here, buddy. And so I said, you know what? Right there's good. I said, you know what? Daddy's really nervous. You know what would help Daddy out? He said, what's that? I said, what if you come up and help me for a little bit? And he smiled real big and said, yeah, I'll do that. So Leo's going to help us today. You want to have a seat? Do you know what you're going to talk about today? What? Yeah, you're not sure, are you? Yeah. Go ahead and see if that thing's on.
So what?
I haven't even asked you a question yet. All right, so I did not ask Leo what we'd be talking about because I wanted his responses to be sincere. But Mommy and Daddy ask you lots of questions, don't we? And we have you guys say things. You have some favorite sayings, yeah. And I'm going to help you out here and get you started, and then you finish the statement, okay?
Yeah.
All right, this one starts with the word never.
Never give up.
Never give up, okay? And you can see that some of these phrases that we have instilled in our boys kind of come from the coaching mindset, right? And so that one, of course, we want our boys to always persevere, never give up, okay? Of course, when you have little kids and you go through those terrible twos, this one comes in handy. How about you get what you get?
Don't throw a fit.
And you don't throw a fit. Very, very important, okay? Very important. Let's see. Sometimes at home we compete with our brothers, don't we? Do you always win when you play against your brothers? No, and sometimes losing's hard, isn't it? So sometimes we have to say, keep trying.
No crying.
No crying. Keep trying, no crying. You're doing good. He said, I know. As you can tell, he's very shy and humble. All right, last one. This one is kind of the one that I wanted to focus on this morning, and this is one that Angie and I have done kind of as a result of some of the things that we have learned and talked about as a family as a result of church and just kind of our transformation through this gospel the last couple of years. So this one's a question that we ask a lot. That we ask a lot, and that is, when does Daddy love you?
All the time.
All the time. Daddy loves you all the time. I'm gonna give you some follow-up questions on that. Does Daddy love you when you're a good boy?
Yes.
Yes, he does. Does Daddy love you when you're a bad boy?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, he does. All right, Leo, thank you very much for helping today. Let's give Leo a round of applause. So that's an example of just some of the phrases that we like to use at home. And we have a lot of fun with it, but of course there's a purpose behind a lot of those statements too. So you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Never give up. Keep trying, no crying. And most importantly, when does Daddy love you? And we've kind of trained the boys, or perhaps you might say brainwashed the boys, to respond all the time. So when does Daddy love you? You might think this answer was obvious. Of course your daddy loves you. But I can promise you this, when we first asked our boys, when does daddy love you? When does mommy love you? That response that you just heard was not the first response, okay? What do you think the first response was? Absolutely, I can already hear something. When I'm good, when I'm a good boy. That was the first thing we started hearing from our boys, okay? If our Heavenly Father asked us the same question, what would our response be? What would you say to God if he asked you that? I bet most of us would respond with an answer like all the time or always. However, would our lives, our decisions, our motivations truly reflect that answer? My boys have always done things in an attempt to earn my affection. Each of them will say that their favorite number is 32. They each like the Miami Dolphins. They are constantly reminding me of ways that we are similar. Liam especially does this. Lincoln and I kind of look alike, so he hears a lot of that, like, oh, you're just like your daddy, you're just like your daddy. So Liam then started saying things like, hey, Daddy, we both like blueberry muffins, don't we? Hey, we both do this, right, Daddy? Okay? So there, and I know that these are things you guys have, all parents out there have experienced as well. Okay? And that's a fun part of parenting, but it also kind of touches on a topic or subject that I think really ties in with that gospel message. Why is it that they feel the need to convince me that I should love them? From a parent's perspective, they don't have to like the Miami Dolphins for me to love them. Do I like it? Absolutely. Do I like hearing them say 32 is their favorite number? Absolutely. May I give them, extra candy if they say so? Absolutely. I might. Okay? But even if one of them said they loved the New England Patriots, despite the fact that I might ship them out to somebody else's house for a couple of days, I would still love them. Okay? When I realized they were trying to earn my affection, and as I began to see this reflected in my own relationship with God, a parental decision was made to use the gospel message to instill a more accurate and therefore more fruitful mindset. Angie and I's desire as parents is that our boys will come to learn that they are loved because of who they are, not because of what they say or because of what they do. We have attempted to connect this perspective to the gospel message with our boys, though I imagine we will be able to truly drive this home as they continue to get older. Just for fun, who's to blame for a son or daughter thinking they need to earn their parents' love? I can tell you, as I grew up, I felt that pressure to be good enough for my parents. Is that my parents' fault? I have tried to earn my salvation, and I've tried to earn my way into the family with my relationship with God. Is that God's fault that I responded that way? I don't believe it is. My parents never told me that I had to do X, Y, and Z for them to love me. They never said that. The Bible makes it very clear that it isn't up to our own faith and our own actions to earn salvation. And yet, at times, we have a tendency to fall in that rut and try to do that. Can you imagine the following scriptures? For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever does mighty works, that whoever reads their entire Bible in a year, at least once in a lifetime, that whoever gives at least 10.01% of their career earnings in tithe, that whoever gets as close to perfection as humanly possible, they shall not perish, but have eternal life. How about this one? For it is by grace you have been saved, not only by your great works, but also your great faith and your satisfactory church attendance. Okay? The Bible does not drive that message home. It does not tell us that it's up to us and what we do and what we say. In my opinion, that message, the incorrect message, is rarely rarely spoken into our hearts and minds, yet somehow we find ourselves gravitating toward that belief system. As we continually try to insert ourselves into his story, the message becomes conflicting. That is why I believe it is so important to stay focused on the gospel, to be reminded of its truths and our identity as a loved child of God. When I was football coach, we introduced a row the boat message, and long story short, and I've said this before at a, maybe after worship or something, I use it when I try to tell people, when you keep hearing the same message, I don't think that's a bad thing. I told my football boys all the time, if you can finish my statements and my sentences, that's a good thing. If you know where I'm going, oh, here we go again. He's going to say that, we're going to row the boat, we're going to do this and that because I want you to be good husbands. Here he goes again. That's it. To me, that's what we want, okay? So when I think of all this time we've been devoting to the gospel message, I think that's great. I hope there's parts of this story today that you hear and go, I've heard that before. Yeah, I remember hearing that at church before. Yeah, we've said that before. That's great. I think that's the whole point. I could talk for hours about this relationship with God and the implications it has for our redemption through Christ. However, I'd like to move on and kind of share 3 brief aha moments that have had a profound impact on my life these past few years. So we're going to go to point number 1, which is the fail scale. Okay? The fail scale. As I grew up, I idolized the perfection of Jesus. As I mentioned a few weeks back, I had placed him on a pedestal right next to the other heroes in my life. Everything I would do would be filtered through the lives of these heroes. So for instance, to kind of give you a look at my mindset, that would have been, can I become a great football player like Dan Marino? What would Michael Jordan do to become a better ball handler? These are questions that would be rolling through my head, okay? Because these are my favorite sports athletes. How can I become a successful employee, husband, father, like my dad, Captain Reents? How would Jesus have handled these difficult situations I am dealing with at school and with my friends? And notice how easy that transitions into, I've got my sports stars, my family, my dad I look up to, and I look up to Jesus. How I put that same pressure, I just lumped him right in with those heroes of my life, okay? Let's jump forward to a familiar image or a familiar sight that you guys have probably seen, okay? The WWJD bracelets. This is just a random thought for you. As I was thinking about this process and how I grew up, idolizing my favorite sports stars and wanting to be successful like my dad, and then now, also lumping in Jesus into that category. I almost wonder this message added to that pressure. What would Jesus do? Gosh dang, man, now I got to worry about that too, right? Not only am I trying to be a better son, I'm trying to be this, I'm trying to be that, trying to do good, Now I got to ask myself all the time, what would Jesus do? And there's no way I'm going to be able to live up to that. Okay? Think about the pressure that creates. Now, I loved some of the effects of that, or the fallout of that, was boldly proclaiming who you are, that you're a Christian and that you're following Christ. I loved that part of it. Absolutely. But I just wonder if it would be more appropriate for that to say, what did Jesus do, rather than what would Jesus do? All right, moving on. That was just a freebie right there. So back to the fail scale. In my actions, I was living out of a belief that Jesus was the ticket to get into heaven. If you want admission to the show, you must impress the perfect one. I developed a habit of constantly weighing my good actions versus my bad actions. Okay? And yes, I did say this in front of my own students at the high school, which was kind of interesting, right? So you're saying things like, just to give some real transparent examples here. Growing up, especially at the time where I started driving a car, there was an expectation that the radio station must land on WIBI before you turn that car back off, okay? And again, I would say that was not a rule handed down by mom and dad. But I will tell you that it was very much a reality in the minds of Matt and Pat Reents. Okay, so whether or not you listened to it or not, you just knew that before I turned this car off, and I had it preset at 1 so I could get right back to it. Okay, so I may have listened to that secular radio station, or I may have listened to that music that I knew I shouldn't have listened to. But I did start playing in the Wednesday night youth band at church. So I'm trying to balance out here, right? Here's another example. You know, I did watch that movie that mom and dad would definitely not have approved of. And no, I'm not going to tell you what that was. I don't want to get in trouble. But I did read my Bible 5 out of 7 days this week, which was better than last week. I think I crossed the line at school this week when I told that funny and inappropriate joke. But I did take that courageous step of offering to pray for a fellow student at school. Okay? And those are real life examples, right? So you can kind of see how I'm stuck in this game of trying to say, well, I'm beating myself up because I did this, but, you know, I'm doing this, and that's pretty good too. You know, I hope I'm balancing this thing out. And all the while, I feel like to get into heaven, I've got to prove to Jesus that I'm worthy. Okay? And he was perfect. So I've got a mountain to climb to prove to this guy that I should gain admission. The problem is, I had been asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, what must I do to earn salvation? I should have been asking, what has already been done for my salvation? I have known the gospel story for my entire Christian life, yet in reality, I never understood it. I continually tried to earn God's love. I tried to earn my own salvation. Once I learned to avoid the fail scale, I didn't stop doing the things that helped me earn heavenly brownie points. The biggest change was why I do those things. So I still play in the worship band. But I don't play with the worship team to try to counterbalance something bad that I've done. Okay? I still read my Bible, but I don't read my Bible because, well, you know, I did listen to that country music station for a whole week, and, you know, I probably need to get back in the Word to, you know, to balance that out. Okay, so what I'm doing hasn't changed a whole lot, and from the outside perspective, you guys maybe, those of you that have seen me grow up, you might recognize that and say, yeah, that's probably true. What you do hasn't really changed, but I can tell you why I do those things has completely changed. Having the relationship with the Father rather than a relationship with the Father is a very motivating reality. It has ignited my faith through appreciation and astonishment rather than motivation through fear and guilt. And I'm going to follow Mr. Brian Kane's recommendation that he said when you got a good statement, say it twice. Okay, so I'm going to back that up. I used to think he did that because he thought you guys were falling asleep, but I guess he had that planned all along. It has ignited my faith through appreciation and astonishment rather than motivation through fear and guilt. And this whole analogy, you heard Linda Pallone talk about this a couple weeks ago as well. This whole statement of we don't have a relationship with the Father, we have the relationship with the Father. That statement I absolutely love. And I love it for many reasons. One of the reasons why, as soon as I heard it, it really stuck with me and made perfect sense. Again, you've got to realize I've got an athletic mindset, you know, football coach, all that stuff. And this directly reminds me of when you're watching a Monday night football game and they're doing the starting lineups. And what do the guys say when they're announcing themselves? The Ohio State. So they'll say, Patrick Reents, guard, the Ohio State University, the University of Miami, Florida. You know, whatever college they went to. And so when I was growing up, they used to just say it. It used to just be Ohio State University. University of Miami, U of I, okay? And then at some point, I don't know who started it, and it probably was Ohio State. Some guy gets up there and says, the Ohio State University. And what did that statement do compared to all the other statements of where people went to college? Oh yeah, he was saying, I go to the Ohio State University. I don't go to a college, I go to the college. Just by that one phrase, they were saying, I go to the best university in the nation. So when I first heard this statement that say, you don't have a relationship with the Father, you have the relationship with the Father, to me it made perfect sense. You've got the best relationship with the Father, better than all the other relationships. You've got the Son's relationship with the Father. Got a fun picture here for the next one. I watched this show a couple times, didn't get into it a whole lot, but I loved the message of this kind of poster here, right? Heroes, amazing stories of faith. And you look at these heroes of the Bible. So my second, what I would say is a pitfall, right? So the first one was avoid the fail scale of trying to play that game. Number two is that the Bible is not a manual of how to live, it's a story, okay? And more importantly, we're going to talk about some characters of the Bible. I don't know about you all, but I love a great story. I love long movies. If the movie's over 3 hours, I'm probably watching it because I have an expectation. It's going to be a good story. There's going to be lots of twists, ups and downs, okay? I love long movies. And I especially love serial TV shows. I don't necessarily like sitcom TV shows, but I love serial TV shows. Ones that you can, you let it run a couple seasons, and then you go rent it from Family Video and spend a whole weekend watching, 30 episodes. Because the story continues, and every episode leads to the next episode, and then leads to the next episode. Those are the ones that I like, okay? In fact, Angie and I named our 3 boys after prominent male historical figures, many of whom have their own books and movies, okay? So, for instance, you've got Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, known for his integrity and honesty. And that's what we chose for our first son, Lincoln. William Wallace, the character that was featured in the movie Braveheart. Known for his tenacity and being an inspirational leader. So William Wallace we used to name our second son, Liam. And finally, King Leonidas. You met King Leonidas today, okay? Known for his humility, still working on that part, and his sacrifice, okay? We have this conversation with our boys, Lincoln especially. I remember growing up, Angie, what would he say when he saw a penny, or he saw a $5 bill, or he saw a sign with Abraham Lincoln on it? What would he say? Yeah, he'd say, "There I am, Mommy. There I am, Daddy. There I am." So we've had to try to coach them through this, that no, you aren't Abraham Lincoln, okay? He's my favorite president. We really like parts about him, but you're your own person, okay? So we've kind of had to coach them through that. So we don't try to be these people. We look at their stories for inspiration. The Bible is not just a manual on how to live life. I would also tell you that it is not just a storybook of tall tales and heroic men and women. It is a story, one that points forward and backward to Him, capital H. I would like to pause here and state that this is my favorite initial, I guess what you might call a religious conversation. If I'm talking to somebody and we've never really had spiritual talks before, this point, number 2, about heroes of the Bible, is my favorite one to go to because I think a lot of people can connect with it. When I spoke to the high school seniors this past spring, I warned them, this might blow your mind. Especially if you grew up in a church or went to vacation Bible school, this might blow your mind. And I'm thinking there's probably some of you out here today that when you went through this process, it blew your mind as well. So we're going to look at some of these heroes of the Bible, right? So you look at David. And the old takeaway for me was that I need to be more like David. He was brave, had an enormous amount of faith in God's ability to use him. He was a successful young leader. Of course, now my takeaway has completely changed on David. Now my response is, wow, David willingly stepping in on behalf of all of God's chosen people, took on Goliath, which to everyone's expectation meant certain death, to save the Israelites from death, slavery, and hopelessness, which is exactly what Jesus would go on to do for us. I'm not supposed to be like David. I'm not David. I'm the one hiding behind the tents, going, man, I can't believe David's going out there. Okay. Moses, the old takeaway, I need to be more like Moses, willing to be used by God despite my shortcomings. I need to lead others to salvation, thus satisfying the Great Commission. I need to be willing to face adversity and make sacrifices in order to accomplish all that God has planned for me. And even hearing those statements, those don't sound like bad goals, right? But now my takeaway when I think about Moses in the Bible, Moses is a reflection of Jesus, the one who has provided a way out of doom and despair. The Israelites achieved true freedom, not through their own faith or works, but through Moses. This one I really like, the Abraham and Isaac story. You know, I learned David and I learned Moses growing up, and those made sense to me. Be like David, be like Moses, have faith, be a leader. Those made sense to me. The Abraham and Isaac story never sat well with me. So God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. How am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to do that, and why would I want to do that? I wanted to be like Moses. I wanted to be like David. I had no problem chasing after those guys and putting those guys on pedestals. But the Abraham-Isaac story that one always kind of didn't sit well with me. And I get it. The story is about a guy who's supposed to make sacrifices for God, right? So I could tell you why we learned about it. Be willing to sacrifice for God. He's first and foremost, okay? But now when I've come through this gospel transformation, now this story makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. And I don't have that internal struggle anymore of why would God put that story in the Bible? Why did that happen? What am I supposed to learn from this? Now it makes perfect sense. This is not a story meant to inspire us to offer up sacrifice to God. It is about the sacrifice of God. Once again, I challenge you guys, when we're looking at these pictures, the characters or heroes of the Bible, we shouldn't try to be these people. We look for their stories or look at their stories for inspiration. And I made that mistake for far too long, trying to be these people. I thought, man, those people are awesome. The works that they did were awesome. The faith that they had was awesome. And once again, it added that pressure of, I've got to do more. I've got to be more like these people. And I was missing it all along. Point number 3, don't major on the minors. And I realize now I've used a second scale analogy, which I apologize for, but I loved this image, okay? That doesn't make sense. That shouldn't make sense. That should not work, right? For too long, I made the mistake of thinking the gospel message was the warm-up, the pregame layup, the ABCs of religion. Perhaps my assumption was that the simplicity of the gospel story meant that it was only the starting point of our faith. I believed that to continue on in my faith, to go deeper, to study more, to better understand, to strengthen my relationship with God, I thought that I would have to look far beyond the gospel. That was just to get me started. But I got to go deep. I got to go past that if I'm ever going to make this thing work. If I'm going to actually have a real relationship with God, I can't just be still thinking about the gospel, right? That was just to get me in the club and get me saved. I got to move on to deeper and bigger things. I have now learned that the much debated religious topics, which I would admit previously consumed my thought and prayer and hours of study, are not more important than the gospel. For instance, these are topics that I often struggled with or would find myself in, I'll say conversations, not arguments, in conversations about. How about baptism? Baby baptism, water baptism, infant baptism, right? When do you baptize? End times, when's God coming back? Before rapture, after rapture, this year, next year, 10 years, my lifetime, somebody else's lifetime. Spiritual gifts, possible present day, just a thing of the Bible, okay? Please don't misunderstand me. I firmly believe these topics are important and should be discussed and should be studied. However, they should not become faith-defining topics that diminish the story of the gospel. For years, I have had a pet peeve, and I should also add that I've been guilty of this trap as well. For inspiration for this next segment, we're going to watch a little video clip. How many of you are familiar with the YouTube channel of Dude Perfect? The Reents family is a huge fan of, and subscriber of the YouTube channel for Dude Perfect. So we've got a little video clip for you here.
Hey, give me a quick hoop real quick. Is that 10? This ball doesn't have a good grip. Dude, all day. I got this. I'm gonna really try on this one. I'm gonna go two hands. Are you sure you can dunk? I can dunk. Are you? That's like 11. And one. Stay here, stay here, stay here. Check ball, check ball. Are you? Respect the call. God. Here we go, here we go. Ball up. That was not a foul! No. No. Stay here, stay here. He didn't even touch you! Ah! Yeah! Is he serious? She's a girl.
Dude, that's messed up, man.
Hey, cut up. Oh, you got it. Cut up baseline. Yay! Are you serious? It's a girl! That's what you said last time.
Messed up, man.
Oh my gosh. Hey, kick it out. Kick it out. Come on, come on. I'm a shooter. Oh my gosh, you're not post it up. You're 6'6". Put it up. Put it up. Put it up. No. Get down low. Woo! Let's go.
Hey, why does this dude always wear pants? It's 110 outside.
Yeah. Kick it back to you and then you shoot, okay?
Or kick it to him.
We gotta go to you. No.
They like attacked me.
So well, you're pretty good. Where'd you play at?
My coach didn't send my tapes in, so.
Oh, word?
Yeah. Because I hurt my knee. Is what happened.
Your knee, man?
Oh, this one. A couple teams called and
Which
they
teams? It's like Clippers or
Celtics.
Celtics, you know.
They were both trying to, hey, we want you over here, we want you over here.
They were both calling us like, hey, I don't have more than one phone. Oh, yeah. I'm open.
Oh, you know that's what we want. Yeah, buddy. Better not shoot it. Mr. May. Boom. Take point.
Hey, here we go. Game time. Yeah! All day. You can't hold me. Woo! I'm the clutch master.
What?
Never miss. The bank is open.
All right. So there's a little taste of some Dude Perfect. Of course, those guys rose to national fame or viral sensation with their trick shots. And one of the things they did after that video is actually several years old, they started doing stereotypes. And for any of you who have played in pickup basketball games can relate to some of those stereotypes that you just witnessed, okay? So just for fun, I've created a couple stereotypes, right, using this as my inspiration, a couple stereotypes that I have seen and perhaps participated in as a Christian. Number one, I call the Walmart. I am so blessed. God opened up this parking space at Walmart just for me, right next to the door. The next one I call the Geico. I just saved money on my car insurance. Isn't God good? I could go on and list others, but it's not so fun when you start listing things that you've said and done, right? It's fun watching them go, yeah, those guys are crazy. And then you start reading these going, oh, yeah. Okay. A while back, we had a series at church that was about blessings. I don't remember if it was a multi-week series or if it was just a one Sunday sermon. However, I do remember that it perfectly explained a growing confusion of mine. I always felt guilty as I silently questioned statements like the ones I just read. The Walmart, the Geico, right? Some of these Christian stereotypes. I started questioning these things and questioning myself if I caught myself saying those things. And then I would say, who am I to challenge the indescribable sovereignty of God? Does God really care if I save $10 a month on my premiums? Is it not possible that the one who created the heavens and the earth, who created everything, is it not possible that he is also in control of the minute details of our lives? If God gave you this very parking spot, does that mean he loves the drivers of the other 132 cars in the parking lot less than you? These are questions I ask myself on both sides of the argument. Isn't it possible that yes, he did control this? Is it really that big of a deal? I mean, does he really care what parking spot I have at Walmart? I would be back and forth on these questions, back and forth. I can whip myself into a frenzy debating this very issue in my own mind. What I remember from that blessing sermon is that I left with a personal challenge. Do not let yourself be consumed by small acts from God while ignoring and forgetting the act of God. I finally had an explanation for my confusion. Of course, I would go through that thinking one was right and one was wrong. And I was trying to figure out which side of the fence to land on. The issue at hand is not about whether or not God is sovereign over the parking lots. He absolutely is. The issue is that in focusing on such debates, we often are forgetting about God's sovereignty displayed as he sent his one and only Son to die on the cross for us. We aren't talking about how this act opened up a way for us to have the Son's relationship with the Father. The gospel message is the blessing of all blessings. I have now challenged myself to be shocked each and every day with the gospel message. The priority of God's sovereignty has completely changed in my own mind. So even using some of these examples that we've talked about, which of these statements sounds more accurate to you now? Sure, Jesus died on the cross for my sins, but he opened up this spot at Walmart just for me on the very day he knew I needed it. Or, not only has God provided for me and my family by meeting a financial need, but this is the same guy who gave his one and only Son for me and for you so that we could be called children of God and have eternal life. God's sovereignty is still in those messages. Yes, he's sovereign over the parking lots. Yes, he's sovereign over every detail of our lives. But let's not lose sight of which one is the real blessing. In conclusion, don't get caught up in trying to earn your admission into the family. The price has already been paid. Don't get caught up in trying to be just like the heroes of the Bible. You're not the hero of the Bible. As we fellowship and study his word, don't focus solely on the minors and lose sight of the major message of the Bible, the gospel. It is not the starting point of the Bible, it is the whole point of the Bible. Let's live our lives out of the understanding and sheer excitement for what has been made available to us through Christ, while looking to share this great news with all of those around us. Thank you.